I would like to welcome you all to this CAREER4SEA Talk. In this talk, we will be discussing about the trends on the landscape with regards to maritime employment as we move towards this new decade. Technology evolves, job requirement changes, new skills are required, and among others, automation is gaining momentum. Digital training has come to stay. We've seen evolution such as the cloud simulation, and we've seen that the ways of communication changes, and workforce upskilling is a term that is here to stay. As we have a new workplace, we have to bear in mind that all of us have to adjust. In this talk, we are joined by a panel of experts. Let me introduce our panelists. We start with Heidi Heseltine. Heidi is the CEO of Halcyon Recruitment Limited. We have Constantinos Galanakis. Constantinos is the CEO of Elvictor Group. We have Dr. Luiza Shahbazyan, who is the co-founder of the Pivot Company. And last but not least, we have Truelove, who is the managing director of CSMART Training Center, the Carnival Cruises Training Center based in Netherlands. I would like to welcome you all, and I would like to start right away with our first question, and I would like to hear from you. And the first question is, how about the emerging requirement trends in the maritime workplace? How these recruitment trends have been affected by the pandemic? Let's start with Heidi.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me here. In terms of the pandemic, I think the biggest change it's had has obviously been to the workforce in terms we've seen a lot of roles go on hold. We've also seen a lot of people still being hired and having to be very adaptable to the way they're being hired, and being remotely onboarded, requiring more adaptability, greater use of the technology as well. In terms of other trends, I think in general what we're seeing with the industry is that we're seeing more use of data to inform decision making. So there's definitely a trend towards roles requiring the analysis and use of data to that end. Technology as well, and that's another output of the pandemic, and I'm sure that the other esteemed panelists can add to that, particularly with what Bill's seeing at CSMART. But looking at the way we've had to adapt to remote surveying for the, when we can't physically get to the ships, means that's certainly something we've seen have an immediate impact and a very positive response to. Other technology related roles are coming forward on the software side, environmental, as we move forward, obviously with more regulations coming upon us in the not too distant future. Digital roles are increasing as well. We were aware of more organisations looking towards their customer service focus and how they can digitalise to provide an enhanced service. And obviously, also one of the other things we can't ignore at the moment is the growing requirement for greater inclusion and diversity. So we're seeing an increase in people requiring hiring to tie in with diversity D&I strategy as well. Okay. Constantinos, your thoughts?
Yes, I fully agree with Heidi, and the emerging recruitment trends in the maritime workplace from what we have experienced until today, if I can group these trends, I could name 5, let me say. The first is teleworking and future of work, which should be seen as a pivotal practice nowadays, which may be also an incentive strategy for people at work. So we have a new environment. Thus, we have an alternative job landscape, and we have experienced, all of us, that home becomes our office, and thus we need a home and office integration. The second trend is digitalization of quality. Due to all these regulations and upcoming regulations and amended regulations in the maritime industry, in order to follow the quality and the procedures of each business, we need control engines, key performance indicators, we need metrics and electronic checklists nowadays, because everything is done through the cloud. So we need an environment that can assist us and give us this toolbox, let me say. The third trend from my point of view is e-recruitment, which we use as a business, which has tools, procedures, and new management concepts, securing the safe recruitment for both ashore and sea personnel at the same time, because due to the pandemic, we cannot meet each other and there are various restrictions. And digitalization of procedures and requirements and virtual screening and selection is the new fashion and the new highway, let me say, of how the recruitment has to be done from now on. The fourth pillar and trend is e-learning. And I believe we have the best in our group, Mr. Bill, to talk about it, which has to do with focused training, building the skill set of the people, either ashore and on board seafarers, and interactive training, which moves to a new era of gamification that comes up in the near future. And I have read a lot about gamification, which is the easiest way to train people. And the last and the most difficult trend that many companies have to restructure themselves is agile cross-functional teams, meaning a team of people that have to be ready, standby, proactive, and then reactive. These, I believe, are the basic 5 trends. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Constantinos, for the overview. Luiza, your thoughts?
I would like to focus on 2 trends which are directly related to how we hire people in the maritime industry. The first trend that I've seen recently, the last couple of years, is hiring for soft skills and potential, which is becoming more prominent with the years. There are a lot of companies that are assessing their officers for leadership skills, empathy, analytical thinking, the presence of growth mindset. We also have resilience, which is the buzzword of the year 2020, I believe, and we all have firsthand experience of how important is that. And Constantinos is one of the people that believes in this approach, and we worked in the past and had a successful project about assessing soft skills of candidates. Another trend I would like to pinpoint is the shortage of qualified seafarers. And we've seen lately, okay, we know the projections, we know there will be a shortage, but lately there are a lot of maritime professionals sharing their concerns about the effect of the pandemic on the willingness of people to go to work at sea. And I think this will change dramatically the game when it comes to the demands that the seafarers are going to make from their employers, and also what the employers have to do working hard to attract and to retain their talent.
Thank you, Luiza. Bill, your thoughts?
Apostolos, thanks so much and good morning. And again, thank you for allowing me to join the panel. Tremendous points already made. I would just perhaps offer that I think I look at this question through 2 lenses, pre-COVID, post-COVID. And I think we need to be careful that in the moment we're not reacting as opposed to acting deliberately in terms of the trends we're seeing. I think the industry was addressing some very significant trends pre-COVID, and we've heard them from colleagues already: diversity, gender balance, soft skills, communication. All of those things remain important as we move forward. So I think we need to make sure that we stay consistent on the long game of where we were going. I think, and I don't day-to-day play in the specific recruiting field, but I think holistically the industry now faces a challenge of credibility. That's going to be something we're going to need to think about moving forward. Many nations did not support the seafarers to the degree we would have expected during this pandemic. And so I just wonder how that would be playing out as recruiters are approaching seafarers to say, come be part of the family. I think we're up against a bit of a credibility communications issue over the next while that we're going to have to put some focus on to remind the seafarers and their families that there is a very important and career enhancing opportunity here to be a mariner at sea. A couple other points I would just stress from a trends perspective. As we heard Luiza say, I think we've learned an awful lot about the importance of soft skills, about breaking down that hierarchical, traditional maritime environment to allow an environment that is supportive of folks in very difficult situations. We all know that the maritime sector is the lifeblood of our global economy, and I think that came under some questions. So certainly focusing on that, and then to build on one other point that Luiza made that we're seeing is, how do we leverage technology as a predictor to the adaptability capability of the seafarer to do their job? And so what more can we be doing through psychometric testing, simulation, and other things like that to ensure right fit, both from an employee and an employer perspective? So those would be a few thoughts from a recruiting perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Now, I would like to move on to another topic. I would like to ask you to list what are the new skills in demand in this evolving landscape in terms of, let's say, more or less priority. I would like to ask you to prioritize what are the new skills in demand. Heidi.
I think in terms of skills, I think for me it's the one we're touching on already. It's the soft skills in many respects, and I agree with what's been said about, you know, that there's been some new skills required because of COVID, and that's certainly been technology driven, where, you know, the shore-based employees have had to adapt to technology. So have the seafarers. You know, there's been some really interesting transition plans with the seafarers to try and keep them connected. I'm aware of, you know, organisations who have put Microsoft Teams on, made that accessible to all of their seafarers to try and improve the connectivity, which isn't radical in the grand scheme of things, but for the shipping community, relatively so. But I think for me, the biggest change is the soft skills, because we're looking to really develop people to be inclusive leaders of the future, and shipping isn't so used to having inclusive leadership in the same way. And we're having to challenge that within the diversity and inclusion landscape. I think other skills we've already touched on as well is the, you know, the technology side, but also the adaptability, the analytical, the numerical skills, which have all, they're not new, none of them are new, but business is being looked at in very different ways these days. So when we're talking about the evolving landscape and how we're bringing people into that, what we're seeing is clients are requiring a slightly different skill set in order to shape their end result, and they're giving much more thought to that. And as I said in my last answer, we're seeing a lot more decisions now being based on the use of data, particularly on the commercial side of things. That's really changed in the last couple of years. And then obviously with the leadership requirement, as I say, that's something that we're seeing change a fair amount as well. And of course, the ongoing change with technology, looking ahead to potentially the autonomous vessels. Obviously, we don't know quite how far that's going to stretch at the moment, but you know, that's also creating a potential opportunity, but it will require people with a different skill set, and that's yet to be determined. Do we want people who've been to sea who can then work ashore, or is it a completely new skill set where we can really capitalize on the future talent coming into shipping and actually make ourselves more attractive? Because I think we've also highlighted we have a bit of an attraction issue to shipping in many areas. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done to really evaluate also exactly what a lot of those skills are going to be, particularly as we come out of COVID.
Okay, Constantinos, your thought?
Yes, I would like to add some things. First of all, in shipping, we have a big change generally to the technology on board the ships. But what is the gap? And that's why I'm mentioning this in order to identify the new skills that are needed for the workplace, is the gap between the companies and the management, between all the participants in the chain of shipping. So the new skills in demand in this evolving landscape, allow me to say, should be digital proficiency, as Ms. Heidi said. So we will see new positions coming up, like data analysis, process automation specialist, digital transformation specialist, software and application developers, more coming into the shipping industry. I personally have experienced the last. Second is GDPR and data privacy and information security. which are very, very important facts that a solution has to be found here, because it's an obstacle also to the evolution of shipping, sometimes the data privacy and GDPR. So based on the procedures, you have to know and you have to go step by step in order to be compliant. And it's a very difficult task in the digitalization stage, because you have to comply. Then I believe in this, as we call it, cross-team collaboration with multicultural communication skills and an agile mindset, as we said previously. And the team members should be multifunctional and multitasking and problem solving at the same time. Thus, as I mentioned previously, we must be more proactive and seeking people that they are more proactive minded and then reactive, because in shipping today we are reactive, the most of us. So we have to be more proactive and thus to have an adaptability on various circumstances. And we have to identify now, because we are on the cloud and we are at our homes, and as we said, our homes became our office, and this means of communication, mobiles and cloud systems should takes all the time, much of our time. So we have to identify time wasters and find skillful people that they know about time management. Then is the flexibility on our schedule, because we have experienced also this due to the pandemic, that we don't have 8 hours or 10 hours work. We are in shipping. When somebody calls us, we simply pick up the phone, whatever time it is. Stay in the loop with the team is another skill, because many people, they are not, how to say, adjusted to team management or team skills. And then it comes self-advocacy, negotiation, and emotional intelligence. Plus, we have to be clear and to the point. And by this, we can build trust and rapport. Those are some more, let me say, skills that the people nowadays will need. And at last, which is the most important, continuous remote education and training. Because digital and non-cognitive skills like communication, planning, and teamwork are increasingly necessary to seize emerging job opportunities. Technology, to sum up, is the key driver of new forms of work. And this key driver requires all these skills I previously mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, Luiza, your thoughts?
Well, it's difficult to add something to the comprehensive answers of the rest of the panelists. I just want to, yes, echo the point that we're looking at a number of cognitive and a number of non-cognitive skills that you need to develop. I would focus on two of them. The first one is empathy, and the second one is data analytics, in line with what is already discussed. Maritime industry is probably undergoing its biggest transition since its existence in the coming 1 or 2 decades. And this calls for new ways of doing things. And the best way to create a meaningful and sustainable innovation is empathy. We have to understand better our users, our customers, our employees. And in order to do that, we need insights. And it's unbelievable how much as an industry and how much of it just stays attached passively in databases. So this is so trapped value that all the companies that manage to release and make sense of it would really disturb the way we do things.
Okay, thank you. Bill, your thoughts on these skills, emerging skills required, and I would like to also ask you to add your thoughts on how you manage this multicultural, let's say, landscape, because on board the cruise ship, one of these large cruise ships that Carnival is operating, you have more than 1,000 crew, and I assume you have dozens of nationalities, different nationalities. Give us your thoughts, please.
Thanks, Apostolos, and tremendous points made by colleagues in terms of new skills. Perhaps just to take a different twist, I would say let us not forget the fundamental skills. and not get overly focused at the expense of remembering at the end of the day, we need mariners who have core mariner skills, deck and tech. But what might be new is how we continue to evolve in the areas of competency frameworks, lifelong learning, things that will encourage retention. I think the mariner of the future will not be satisfied just to do one thing. They want to have an opportunity to grow and develop. So the whole concept of lifelong learning, ongoing development of core and basic skills, and then build on top of that these new and emerging skills. I would only add one more emerging skill to those that have been very expertly presented by others, and that is, I think over the past months, we've learned the importance of the skill of understanding how to live, work, and sustain ourselves in a higher threat, if you will, health environment. So what are the new skills around being able to prevent, detect, react, respond to an outbreak of a virus on board a ship? And that is a new skill that I think we're learning a lot about now that is not going to go away in the next while. So there's a shift that has to happen here. How are we enabling our mariners to operate in that environment? What have we learned over the past year, and how will we take that forward? I think that would be important. I would also say let's not lose sight of the security portfolio as well. We still have ships sadly out there on the high seas that are experiencing pirate attacks and other things. So while not a new skill, it's something we shouldn't forget about is the fundamental skills around security at sea. To your specific point on multicultural, absolutely. I mean, Carnival is absolutely a multicultural organization, and we see that every day at CSMART and spend a lot of time thinking about the behavioral elements of training, the soft skills, the interactive piece, the communication skills. We heard the word empathy, awareness, understanding of cultural differences, inculcating that norm of always stepping back and assessing how your message is being heard through various filters by different receivers, and how that applies in a BRM, ERM environment, communications, clarity, precision, and that closed loop to make sure the message is actually being understood correctly across those cultures and languages. Again, as we all know, recognizing that many mariners are operating in their second or third language at sea. So this goes back to the core of what your organization stands for in terms of safety at sea. This is all about safety. I hope that helps, Apostolos.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, I would like to ask, how could we transform, let's say, the workforce of the future through upskilling? And I would like to ask you, what would be your priorities, let's say, where we should focus in order to prepare for the future? Heidi.
Perhaps controversially, I'm going to change my answer on that to actually what do we need to do to transform our working environments? Because I think we can upskill the workforce, but if we don't have the right working environments for that future workforce, we're going to see them move on really quickly. So for me, we need to look at our working environments and working cultures, particularly from retention and recruitment. But if the environments aren't right, then the upskilling can be relatively short-lived. But assuming we have those working cultures and environments and they do get developed in the right way, I think for me, the workforce of the future, we've spoken about the seafarers. One of the things I think we lack in many areas is a defined career path and a transition from sea to shore. We do see mariners coming ashore, but it's a little bit limited and it's not well defined. It has increased in recent years, particularly for those companies who want to try and create more employee engagement and bring their own seafarers into their offices. But there is still a mentality out there that, again, perhaps on the soft skills side as well, that if you've been at sea for a lengthy period of time, there's a perception that would you adjust to life ashore, and some people don't want to take what they see as a perceived risk. So I think helping the seafarers understand and upskill on those side of things, what to expect and how to adapt, but also I think upskilling those in the shore-based positions already to help those people adapt would be key. And I think we spoke about Constantinos in particular. I think in the last question mentioned training. one of the things that we've seen on the shore-based side, when we look at some of the work we're doing and the research we're doing, is that a lot of our employees are very open, and the majority by far are open to more training and development, but they actually lack the opportunity to have it. So for me, I would suggest that we need to upskill by providing more opportunities for personal development, particularly where a lot of shipping is relatively flat structured. On the shore side, you don't necessarily have a clear promotion ladder. So it's the personal development, I think, is critical on that side of things. In order for people to develop their soft skills as well, and particularly where we're already identifying that those are becoming more of a requirement. And the other thing I think would really benefit in terms of upskilling is to stop keeping people in one lane of shipping. So you're not just going to be in operations, you're not just going to be in chartering or broking or finance, but really to allow, particularly obviously at the earlier levels, people to have a much broader experience of the industry, because it's that broader experience that allows them to develop their opinions, their thoughts, and to really add value to an organisation further down the line. If we keep people just siloed, we're really, I think, limiting the workforce of the future. So I think we have some work to do there, and you know, I think we'd see some great results. And the companies I know who do that, they have great retention, and they really do get some positive engagement.
Yeah. Cannot agree more. I would also like to ask, because you mentioned the transition from sea to shore, I would also like to ask Constantinos, maybe both of you have some figures handy. There is a perception, let's say, we are of the impression that seafarers tend to stay less at sea in these days. When I mean less, I mean pursuing a career at sea. They're transitioning to shore, let's say, a little bit earlier than it was, let's say, 10, 20 years ago. Do you have any sort of figures, how many years they stay at sea before they transit, let's say, to a role ashore? Do you have any figures handy?
I'm afraid I don't. Our area of specialism is actually on the shore-based side. So, of course, we acquire the seafaring knowledge through that. What I would say is that we're certainly aware that time for a lot becomes more limited at sea, and they're keen to move ashore. And quite often, I think it's the family dynamic as well that's driving that, and the requirements of that. And certainly, of course, when we look at some other areas that are affecting the industry, particularly where we're trying to increase the gender gap at sea, which is going to be, I suspect, a lifelong battle unless things radically change. You know, that's really important in that area as well. But Constantinos may well have some better data.
Yeah. Constantinos, do you have any sort of data with regards to how many years they stay at sea before they seek a career ashore? And of course,
first of all, it depends on the nationality and the culture. Let's start from there. And how important the seamanship is in each country. Still, Filipinos are #1 recruiting the most vessels around the world. We have also other nationalities like Ukrainians, Russians, Georgians, etc., etc. But what we see is not about on the seaman side, it's on the regulation side, because when it comes to tankers, and the oil majors require, which is, let me say, against the ILO MLC, and they require maximum 55 years old master or chief engineer, you may understand that they block up to 55 years old. They put a limit on the seamanship. And if, of course, if it's an ex-crew of yours, you will use him another 2-3 years. But then they have these risk ratios about the age, the BMI, and all these things concerning potential incidents or accidents on board or health. And the P&I clubs also on the other side. So as you understand, the legalities placed by various and different organizations are causing problems. And the problem generally faced until today, that we are in 2021, is that all these organizations do not sit on the same table with the real players, which are the ship managers, the crew managers, and the recruitment companies, to discuss and see what is pragmatic and what is realistic to be done. They just make some laws, they publish them, and everybody has to follow.
Yeah.
But those are the problems, because always there is this rumor, let me say, that seafarers, we have a shortage of seafarers. Why we have a shortage of seafarers? And I'm talking about skilled seafarers. Number one is these things that I mentioned about the regulations from those international organizations that they regulate the shipping market. Secondly, is that they are looking at the shortage and they are not looking at the leakage from their retention of the pools, of their pool of seafarers. In order to judge, allow me to say, a seafarer, first of all, you have to judge the company yourself if the procedures that you apply to the seafarers are correct. Because based on our kind of work and because we are service-related company, we have seen various ISM policies, etc., and some they are outdated, I may say. In order to judge a seafarer, first you have to judge your own company if your procedures are correct. Number one. Number two is to see do you have debriefing reports? Because, okay, you appraise the seafarer. Have you heard what the seafarer has to say about your company or about the personnel joining your ships to do the inspection? Are they happy with the food, with the life condition on board? Those things have to interact in order to have an equilibrium and to find the real causes. And this is what we have done. The appraisal should not be a judging instrument. Appraisal should be identification of areas of improvement of the seafarer. Yeah. So from the time that the seafarer manages your fortune, which is called ship today, you have to respect him first. So you have to listen to his needs. And when you listen to his needs, contradict it with the appraisal and the training standards that your company has placed, and identify, as I said, these areas of improvement, and send for training the seafarer. If you improve the seafarer, and if the seafarer believes that the company likes to build his career and also his personal skills, he will stick with your company, so you will not have leakage, so you will not have a shortage at the end of the day. Yeah. There are so many cadets lately in various countries that, trust me, we have more than enough cadets, but nobody gets cadets. There are only few companies that they are looking long-term and that they are taking cadets. And the cadets are cheap, number one. And if you plan it in 2-3 years' time, you can have junior officers and save a lot of money from the OPEX of the vessel. But this is a problem. But if I can come back to the main question of the skills of the upskilling, let me say, I believe that adaptability, and based on what I said, adaptability to unforeseen circumstances is one of the priorities. The business agility and communicating with empathy, as previously mentioned by Luiza, and also put people first, which I believe I made this comment. And focus on few concrete business outcomes, because there are so many things on the daily business that you have to deal. You have to prioritize what are the most important. Then design a compelling experience, so the people will have a nice tool and friendly tool to use. Start with high impact roles, promote and highlight innovation, and fight against, let me say, resistance to change. Because in shipping nowadays, let's not hide behind our finger. There is a huge resistance to change. They are afraid of technology, the most companies, or they don't know how to use it. And plan with commitment, track results, and course correct, and put the know-how of the people into these cloud systems and guide the users. You must not judge the users, you have to guide the users, even they are ashore personnel or seafarers. Those I had to say. I don't know if I was clear about the real problems, let me say, that we face and the obstacles.
Okay, thank you. Luiza, your thoughts about upskilling and priorities?
I totally agree that we have to put people first when we talk about upskilling, because it will not be forced. People should be motivated. We have to create a culture where we motivate the passion for learning, not just encourage people to follow and have a hunger for approval. Because if they want that, they just go along the way and they will never be motivated to really engage in a lifelong learning, which is necessary for the industry to move on. I would say that we have to really take a good look at how we structure the training. We have this obsession with certificates, but what we have to actually care is about the skills that people develop. And a lot of times the most beneficial is the informal learning. So what you're learning on the job, which is very difficult to be tackled, measured, and recognized. But it's a very good way to develop your skills and develop your career. And also we have to think about the incentives. A lot of times we punish seafarers for learning because we ask them to learn in their own time with their own money. So this is not creating a positive culture of learning. And the other thing is how we pay. So are we paying for performance or we're paying for skills? And a lot of companies beyond the maritime are moving towards the model of paying for skills, because merits and your past performance is one thing, but you want to constantly update yourself. Otherwise, you're outdated very fast.
Okay, thank you. Bill, your thoughts on upskilling priorities?
Again, tremendous comments. I think as we have this part of the conversation, it's about remembering too that we're coming up against thousands of years of maritime history here. And so we're trying to change a fundamental culture that from its origin has been hierarchical based. Training has not always, lifelong learning has not always been a principle of the mariner industry. And I think also to Heidi's great point of, and Luiza, of the environment, of recognizing, I think globally now that those coming into the workforce are thinking jobs, not careers. So we talk about lifelong learning, but for many, they will sample many different experiences through their working years. And so how do we create an environment where you can both have upskilling, but you can allow a certain degree of transient in and out of the sector? Or if you look at it from the ongoing discussion around gender balance, how do we better enable ladies to join the organization and then at those right points in their life, take a time out, have family, and then come back into the industry and still be advancing in the sector? So I think those are important points from the environment. I think as well, to another point that was made, upskilling through all of the tool sets. And so increasingly through this period, we've had to do a lot of thinking about how do we deliver the right training in the right way, be it on site, online, or on board. And I think as we think about upskilling, what is the role and function of onboard leadership at all levels to help train their reliefs? And is there a culture of continuous development on the ship itself? And how does the shipper encourage and incent that type of ownership on board? Again, slightly different than the historical model of the shipping world, but something that I think is becoming more and more important. Again, breaking down those barriers between officer and ratings. How do we create that psychologically safe environment to allow that everyone is part of the solution and success of the organization? I think that in and of itself is an important upskilling skill set that we should all be talking about. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Now, my next question is about the key challenges. Constantinos touched upon some of the challenges. I would like to ask you to summarize the key challenges in the recruitment and retention, either of shore executives from my point of view or seafarers. Constantinos touched upon a number of issues regarding the key challenges in the recruitment and retention of seafarers. Heidi, your thoughts?
For me, I think the biggest challenge at the moment, and it's not a new one, is that shipping is not seen to be a particularly attractive industry to new talent coming in. And I think that's something that is accepted by many, not all. I'm not saying that's correct, but I think we operate a lot under a bit of a shroud of secrecy. We don't necessarily market ourselves as an industry in the correct way, and therefore we there's not much visibility about actually the career paths that you can have out there. And I think we've already touched on this. We need to create career pathways and have those more readily defined than we do at the moment. So that if you join, I mean, back in the day, a long, long time ago, I joined in vessel operations. It's where I started my career. And that was my career path. You know, it was vessel operations. There wasn't really anything else available. You know, when I was doing it, forget trying to move into commercial, that was a real challenge. And almost impossible. So I think we have to open ourselves up a bit more in terms of the way that we're thinking, become more progressive, more forward thinking. What is it that future generations are looking for? They're looking for organisations that provide them with career pathways, allow them to have different experiences, for organisations that embrace technology, that provide feedback and development opportunities in ways the vast majority of organisations in shipping don't at the moment. We're still, you know, we only really started getting HR departments probably in the last 15 years. So we've got a lot of catching up to do, I think, in terms of where we're at. So I think we really, really need to look at that. Future Talent is also very focused on social issues. So they will be looking at diversity. We know that, it's proven in the research that's already been done across, you know, generations Z and other age profiles. So when we as an industry, I'm co-founder of Diversity Study Group, and you know, our data is showing we've got 86% of senior management roles are held by white males. That has to change. We've got a representation of those identifying as Black as 1%. We're a global industry. We have this talent on our respective doorsteps. So I think we really have to change the way we're going about things in order not to fill quotas, but in order to open ourselves up to a more diverse way of thinking, a more diverse way of doing things for the greater good of the industry. As I say, for me, it's definitely not about the quota filling. I think that can be very mixed messaging. I think the flat structure that I've mentioned before in a lot of organisations does mean we need to be thinking about what we're offering and how we're offering it. So we don't necessarily need to revisit our structures, but what is it we can offer people coming in? And I think that movement and the lateral movement and those other defined career pathways is one. Historically, we've had a lot of inflexibility, and I have to say, I don't think there's many benefits coming out of COVID, but the move to flexible and remote working was long overdue for the industry and was really holding back so many organisations from attracting and particularly retaining the right talent. But also, I think we need to be making sure that we're encouraging, on the gender balance side, both males and females to take advantage of all of this, because you know, we spoke before, and I think Bill made the point as well, and rightly so, of, you know, the changes having allowed the flexible working to support the females a bit more in terms of perhaps the way they do things and the working environment. But there's actually studies showing that when you look at males and take, for example, paternity leave, a lot of males don't ask for paternity leave, but the results when they take it and come back into the workplace are quite phenomenal in terms of the impact on their mental well-being, their lives at home, but also how they come back re-engaged and re-energized for work as well. So I think there's a lot we can do around our working environments and cultures. I think there's others much better qualified on the seafarer side than I am, but I also think one of the challenges we really need to be looking at moving forward as well is the mental well-being. And that's particularly with COVID as well. I've seen it on the shore-based side, and I think so it's not purely limited to the seafarers, but we know the seafarers have had such a horrendous time of it that I think we really need to be, you know, tying in as well with what Luiza said, the empathy side. We've got to be thinking about what our people are going through and showing that we're doing our best to look out for them, and that we have an environment where they are supported, and that the families of those people, particularly the seafaring side, are also supported in order to encourage people still to come into the industry. And I do think if we don't show that and demonstrate it and commit to it, we're going to have an ongoing issue with the attraction, particularly on the seafaring side on that point, because I'm aware there's a number of seafarers who are not so keen to return in a hurry.
Okay, thank you. I have some, I would like to just state my reservations. We tend to, I don't disagree with what you say. I would like to point out something which I think is important. We tend to discuss about shipping like being a uniform industry, which is not. We have, when we say shipping, we have from offshore to yachts, and we have deep sea shipping. And even if you go to these large ships, we have cruise ships like the one that Carnival, for example, is operating, which are more or less a 5-star or a 6-star hotel in some of the cases, especially the brand new ones. People would love to go over there. They would pay to go for a cruise, let alone let's say to work on these ships and get paid. From one point of view, we have LNGs, and then we have the general cargos and other ships. The industry is not uniform, and correctly pointed out by Constantinos in his earlier comment, not all operators are the same. They are not the same. We have operators who are first class, top tier, world class organizations. I'm just going to name Carnival here, which is listed, and so on and so forth. They operate in all of the continents, and again, especially the large, for example, container operators, they operate in a number of countries. They are big organizations, top tier from any point of view. And we have smaller operators who are, let's say, bottom tier operators, put it in that sense. But all of these operators are operating in the same market. And I fully agree with what you said, Heidi, at the beginning, that the image is not so good. The image of shipping is not so good. Why? Because of these poor and, let's say, bottom tier operators. I'm just saying I have this reservation because we tend to discuss about shipping like being a uniform industry, which is not. It's not. And I fully agree with what you said. I'm just pointing this out because at some point we have to bear this in mind, because we have to allow for these, different types and different sort of organizations to operate in the same market. So
I agree with what you're saying completely, but I think even a lot of those, what you're describing as a top tier organization, certainly when it comes to some elements of their working environments and when they're looking at creating the inclusive working environment for their employee engagement and future attraction, but also retention, the ones we're working with, and we're working with, some who've been looking at this for a number of years, even they would say that they're still at sort of on that side of things at the earlier stages of their journey compared to certain other industries. So I completely agree with what you're saying, but I still think by and large within the industry, there's collaboratively, we can still do a fair amount to improve the image. But yet there are some phenomenal companies out there, and there are some much less than phenomenal ones. But I think that we just, at the moment, one of the real positives I'm seeing, particularly when it comes to diversity and inclusion, is the collaboration is fantastic.
Yeah.
And that real passion to work together for positive change is something I haven't seen in a very, very long time.
Yeah. Constantinos, your thoughts?
Yes, first of all, I fully agree with Heidi, Miss Heidi. She mentioned the most important things and how we can improve, first of all, the industry, before asking to your question, Mr. Apostolos. The thing is that it sounds for me and for all of us that we are young aged, when we are talking about diversity, whereas we shouldn't talk about it. In my business, for example, we are 60% women in the staff position and in the management position also. So I saw the last 4 years two basically discussions in our industry, which sounds, let me say, if you compare them with airlines industry, it sounds like talks that happened 70 years ago in the airlines industry, and this is diversity and digitalization. So the thing is that we have, let me say, and allow me to say, wake up and see how we can improve our industry, because our industry, 90% of the cargo is transferred through our industry. We have to increase the skills of all of us, including myself, on a daily basis. The most important factor today in order to improve your way of thinking is continuous training on various things, not on one specific thing. Specialization nowadays cannot be, let me say, accepted, because due to all these things we discussed until today, you must be multitasking. And in order to be multitasking, you have to know some more things, and you cannot learn all these things at once. So you need continuous training and upgrading of yourself. So in order to improve the industry, from my perspective, allow me to say, is, as Ms. Heidi said, collaboration. But this collaboration, in order, as we know in shipping, has to be documented, evident. So how it can be? Only through digital collaboration and coordination. Then we have a huge complexity of logistics. And as we mentioned, we have different kind of operators, different kind of ships, different kind of needs. And we have to stop this resistance to change. Also, we have to make our seafarers and our people to feel safe and secure in our business and in our ships. Thus, in order to achieve this, we have not to allow a blame culture. Thus, we have to put no blame culture in our way of thinking. We have to investigate everything. We have to go by the procedures strictly and improve the procedures of our company. And also make it less bureaucratic, because a lot of ISM policies I have read, they are of 1,700, 2,000 pages. Can you imagine when you employ a seafarer to go on board to put him to read 1,700 pages? It's unbelievable. And then we have to see the career development, as Ms. Heidi pointed out very clearly. And she mentioned many things, how to improve the career development. And we have to be focused on each person, not to go by the book. Each person has its own, let me say, needs, its own career path, its own experiences, and other things to think about. So these are the basic key challenges, allow me to say. And last but not least, which is unfortunately one of the resistance to change apart from technology in shipping, is freedom to act. If you want your people to like your business and stay in your business, even they are seafarers or ashore, you have to give them freedom. A clear job description, and tell them, do it. You must not be always above and judging, criticizing, and this. You have to leave them, feel the company and the responsibility. And in order to go with the vision of the company, you must allow them to be free in your business. This is what I believe that are the main challenges, and also change way of thinking.
Okay. Luiza, your thoughts? What are the key challenges?
Well, I cannot agree more with what was mentioned already. I would take on the idea of paying attention to the individual needs of each person. Indeed, there are a lot of periods of generalizing, either on the level of the industry or in the level of different groups of employees, like seafarers like this, officers are like that, ratings are like this. So what we have to do in order to understand and retain people is understand what is driving them, each of them, their personal reasons, the reasons related to the organization, the reasons related to the industry. We know that there are a lot of issues, the issue of criminalization, the issue of bad communication, but there are also lots of opportunities in the maritime, and people which commit to spend their career in the sector have different reasons to do so. So as long as we use the data that we have and the technology that we have in order to be able to understand better those reasons and use them in order to make decisions, I think we'll be better off.
Okay. Thank you. Bill, your thoughts?
Many tremendous points. I would only add a couple thoughts by reinforcement. First, to your point, Apostolos, in terms of one size does not fit all when we talk about the maritime sector. I think it's a really important point. But I think when it comes to respect and dignity and looking after those sailors, one size does fit all or should fit all. These are fundamentals. I think a second point is it's interesting where we are at in the conversation. As I reflect back on sort of my 40 years in the maritime sector, the conversation has changed so much. We've evolved from a conversation, sadly, of the seafarer was an expendable resource to allow the profit margin to happen, to here we are having a conversation of where do we go next to embrace and enhance the ability of the seafarer to be an enabler to the overall success. And that's really tremendous. And so we are making incredible progress. But to pick up on a couple of other points, first, we should not underestimate that the seafarer of today is globally aware. They're on the internet all the time, seeing what's going on. They are globally conscious, and they will hold us to account. Success is measured in very many ways, and it's not just about the profit margin on the corporate statements. What is that corporation doing for the global good? And I think increasingly we are being held account to that. The final point, Apostolos, I would make, and it's a point I've made in a previous session, but it ties back to something Heidi mentioned, a line I learned long ago, that is, we recruit individuals, but we retain families. And we should never lose sight of the fact that in today's day and age, the seafarer is more than ever concerned about their family's well-being. And so while I acknowledge there's a line of how far we can go, we should not lose sight that the seafarer will stay or go depending on the dinner conversation and how their family feel about the safety, security, prosperity, future opportunity for that individual in the workplace. So how do you look at that whole package from a retention point of view? Thank you.
Okay, I would like to thank you all. Nice and fine points made. But at some point we have to, conclude this discussion. So I would like to roll out my last question, to conclude the session. And I would like to ask you to give a career advice to an 18-year-old who is seeking a career within shipping. So what is the career advice that you would give to this 18-year-old? Heidi.
I think for me, the strongest advice I would give, I've got a daughter who's 15, so I'm probably not that long away from having to give this advice. And the thing for me is you find an organisation that aligns with your values and what you think you want to do. I think there's not so many people who have the defined career path that they know they want to go down. So in this day and age, if you find an organisation that shares your values, then you have a good chance of them embracing what we've already discussed, them listening to you, taking your views into account, and you having the opportunity to progress in the way that you would. I think that if it's an 18-year-old considering a career in shipping, they need to be aware of all of the options. There are so many phenomenal jobs, and for me, I think that's one of the things I would say is that I'm learning every single day. Still, I've been working on the recruitment side for a very, very long time now, and there are still new roles that come in that you're learning about, you understand how they fit in. So I think that I would encourage people to take the time to look at the industry, understand what really appeals to them and how to get that. I also think the power of network, it's always been important in shipping, but I think now we've spoken about, and I think we've all touched on it, is the collaboration, the community feel. We have that more probably now, I think, cross-sector and cross-business sector than we've had for a long time. And of course, technology helps that. And I think for me, it's about making sure that those people understand they've got progressively thinking and open-minded. So hopefully also encourage the organisations that they work with to adopt that as well and to be that way for the future.
Okay, thank you. Constantinos?
Personally, I would like to do a self-criticism instead of proposing to an 18-year-old, and they can make their own clues. If I could personally turn back time, I would go directly to Seamanship and reach either master's or chief engineer's position to live the real shipping. Then take as many e-learning courses. Nowadays, we have these e-learning courses that are specific, are well designed, and you don't need to spend years, let me say, on masters in London or in whatever country. So you can get more skills, more training through the e-learning courses, and there are many companies nowadays in shipping that they have done terrific work. And so I can be multitasked by having these courses. And on my disembarkation, let me say, I would go ashore and work ashore also in order to see both sides of the currency. I would measure my time of relaxation versus the targets and dreams, because whatever we have to do it today and not tomorrow. And I would advise an 18-year-old to listen to your inner you, not to what others have to say. The 18-year-old has to drive himself to success. Nobody else will do. So he has to identify what he really wants or she really wants, and try to be, as I said, multitasking person, and trust himself or herself in order others to trust them. I believe more to guidance to 18 years old people have to enhance them the belief in themselves and what actually they want to do. And if they are going to enter to the maritime industry, they have to be multi-skilled. Thus, what I previously mentioned, I would go for many e-learning courses on the specialization that I would like, and also try to find ways to work both on board and ashore, and in various, as Heidi said correctly previously, to various types of shipping, so I will get the whole spectrum of the shipping industry.
Yeah, Heidi gave away, let's say, a big secret earlier on. Luiza.
I would say them to go for it, because definitely there is enormous untapped value out there in the industry, so you can build a successful career. And to do so, I would advise them also to combine the potential of the soft skills together with the knowledge for the hard skills. So they have to focus on in-demand hard skills related to technology, most likely, but also to make sure that they nurture their love of learning, because their technology skills are going to get outdated very soon. But as long as you nurture your curiosity, you will constantly update them.
Okay, and Bill?
Thanks. It's not what I would say, it's what I did say to my son just before he went into the industry. And to steal Luiza's words, I had them written here, go for it. But go for it with your eyes wide open, because despite all of the wonderful things that we've discussed today from a futures perspective, at the end of the day, going to sea is hard. And you know, you need to go in with your eyes open. You will be away from home. You will have to work hard in difficult conditions. You will have to be adaptable and able to operate in small teams or large teams, depending on the shipping sector you're in. So I think the truth conversation is also important, that this is a challenging industry. You work hard when you are on contract at sea, and that won't go away. But it is an industry that is evolving, and it's an industry that is critical to the global economy, to our well-being, wherever we live in the world, and you can be part of that. It's an industry that's changing, and so if you are progressive in thought, there is lots of space for you to go in and have an influence to help the industry go to the next level and achieve many of the things that we've all been talking about for many, many years, to actually turn that into deliverables and action and make the industry better for the future. So I think any young man or young woman out there thinking about an opportunity, absolutely, as Luiza says, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all very much. I would like to thank you for the fine points and the rounded, let's say, views provided. I would like to thank our viewers and trust we see you in one of our future events. Thank you very much. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.